The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now then, Sunday Papers, you're very welcome. Bring you through the back pages. First off, Sunday World, we should mention, very top of the Sunday World, Golden Girls, because it's been an extraordinary performance by the Irish boxers over the past week. Picture of Kelly Harrington holding a gold medal, as is her general habit these days. Amy Broadhurst as well, Aoife O'Rourke. 3 gold medals, Golden Girls, they lead the way of the 10 fighters who were out at the European Championships. 10 Irish fighters, 7 came home with medals, which is just extraordinary. And then picture Jurgen Klopp, and his face paints a picture, just slack-jawed as he looked on yesterday. Klopp admits he's in very big trouble after embarrassing defeat at Forest. Crippling result for Liverpool, writes Kevin Palmer. And Klopp said afterwards his side are as low as possible. It feels as low as possible. Massive, massive blow. I have no idea how we could lose that game. And he said, we had to make some late changes. We didn't train with this formation for 1 second, but that is not an excuse. We have to win this game. So they'll go 14 points behind Arsenal if they Arsenal win today against Southampton. Back page then of the Sunday Mirror. Top picture is Jurgen Klopp looking down. You can't really see his face. Baseball cap on. Klopp's Forest Fire. And then below that, Chris and Make Up, as in Kiss and Make Up. It's a picture of Ten Hag and Ronaldo. And Cristiano Ronaldo has told Eric Ten Hag he wants to fight for his place, which I don't know if that's going to work out very well. Many things on various fronts. We'll come to that in a moment. And then a picture of Casemiro after his equaliser at Stamford Bridge yesterday. I mean, it's Casemiro. Talked about his water carrier when he arrived, and maybe in the company of Modric and Kroos he didn't stand out as the ball player of that trio, but in Manchester United's midfield he was fantastic on the ball last night. I think he's surprising a few people. Sun Sport then, they have brainless, ruthless, fearless. The brainless is Klopp, it's a bit harsh. Ruthless is Haaland, and fearless is Casemiro, is the back page of the Sun. Then we have Mail on Sunday. It's a picture of Rob Russell scoring a try for Leinster last night. Blues cruise. Russell's late try seals bonus point for Leinster as they hold off dogged Munster youngsters. Leinster 27, Munster 13. If you missed it last night at the Aviva. And then an interesting story here. Shane McGrath, back page. Call for sports funding to be linked to discipline. So this is a Fianna Fáil TD. Niamh Smith, she's TD for Cavan Monaghan. She's on the Oireachtas Joint Committee for Tourism, Culture, Art and Sport as well. And she's saying that maybe funding for various organisations should be linked to discipline. Sunday Independent then. The picture is of Joey Carberry looking on as Leinster score another try, Dan Sheehan going over, and then Klopp, we only have ourselves to blame. And then the Sunday Times, a picture of Joey Carberry at the very top, and it's Carberry and Munster beaten 27-13 by Leinster. And then the other picture is, it's a great one, of Kepa at Stamford Bridge last night. He's just got a touch to Casemiro's header. It's come off the upright, and now he's trying to frantically grab the ball before it crosses the line. Point made is the headline. And beneath that, Kenny hits out at critics stuck in the Charlton era. Very happy to say we have Gavin Casey of the 42 here in studio. Gav, thanks for popping up this morning, appreciate it. And Shane Keegan, Cobh Ramblers manager, you're very welcome as well.
Good job.
I'm great. So Kenny hits out at critics stuck in Charlton era. Seeing as that's in front of me here on the front page of the Sunday Times, this is an interview in the Currency, on the Currency podcast, and so he has called critics who criticise him as being, quote, institutionalised. Going back to the Jack Charlton era, which was an amazing era, what brought success was a certain way of playing. A lot of teams, a lot of ex-players have played that way. They didn't believe we had the players to play another way. They're institutionalised, and we are institutionalised. Some journalists were part of that era. People are institutionalised into thinking there's no other way. I know that can sound quite strong. I do get that. I'm not trying to insult anyone, he says. He's asked about the Brian Kerr criticism. I've known Brian a long time. I don't hold grudges, and I can move on at any stage. And he said of the campaign ahead, I'll never just sit down and play with a low block and hope we can get a set play. I just won't manage that way. They're going to be on the front foot. So journalists institutionalised from the Charlton era.
Yeah, I suppose when he talks about the ex-players, I'm not so sure how much I'd put in that. I mean, any of the people that I've heard on talking, if they are referring to, you know, Ireland being successful, I think more so they were referring to McCarthy era or the good results we got under O'Neill. You don't hear, you know, suppose Damien Delaney is one of the key voices, and others like that. You don't hear them referring back to, we need to play like we did in the Charlton era. I think it's more so kind of comments about, the good results that we were able to achieve playing a different way under McCarthy and O'Neill. So I don't know how much I'd buy into that. The one about taking them on toe to toe, I'll never just sit back and play with a low block and hope we can get a set play. It's so brave. It's and he means it. He absolutely means it. And yet I can't but think that's exactly surely what we need to try and do in some of the games that are going to come up. So it's going to be very interesting to see how we get on against some of the countries we're facing into if we're going to try and go toe to toe and press them and try and outplay them.
Yeah, I mean, Damien Delaney, I would think. I mean, if anyone stresses the argument that Stephen Kenny doesn't have a monopoly on progressive football, it's him. He's saying, well, whether it's Stephen Kenny or someone else, we're going to play good football. We have to play good football. He's certainly not saying let's go back to Jack Charlton era. I think that's a
and that's
misrepresentation of what's being said, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's my point. Yeah, I think, look, I'd say I didn't see the leading questions leading into this. It'd be interesting to hear the full thing, all right, but this might be the end of a conversation that we're getting here, and he might have been kind of backed into a corner a little bit on the various different criticisms he's getting. But no, I haven't heard a whole lot of people. Nobody is harping back to that, but he's just coming out swinging really a little bit, isn't he?
Coming out swinging a bit.
Yeah, I guess the irony is that he's speaking about people in the media, past players being institutionalized, and his refusal to play a low block ever would be probably part of the reason why some of those very people, some of those media professionals and ex-players would suggest that Kenny is almost institutionalized, or that he is so steadfast in his own ideology that it lacks pragmatism, and that actually frustrates a lot of the people that he seems to be hitting out at. So it's a vicious cycle in a way. I agree with Shane. I find it fascinating that he is so almost belligerent in his insistence that Ireland do try to play on the front foot. And I guess to an extent you probably require that belligerence if you are going to revolutionise something or overhaul something and almost change the footballing DNA of a country in a way, at least on a national team level. But at the same time, looking at that European qualification group upon which you'd imagine his tenure will hinge, God, I'd love if he used a little bit of pragmatism, even if it was just for his own sake, because I actually, for the most part, have really enjoyed watching Ireland over the last couple of years. I don't go into international breaks anymore thinking, what a pain in the hoop this is, like a break from the Premier League, back to the sort of monotony of watching Ireland play Georgia or more likely than not Oman. I actually am enthused every time the breaks come around, and for that reason I'd like it to continue. I'd love to see Kenny prove everybody wrong who has doubted him, but I do think low block might be required if that is to be the case over the coming months. Like
you say, he is literally giving kind of fuel to his critics by saying, I will never sit back and play with a low block. I mean, how can you say you will never do anything when it comes to a football match? I would regard my playing style or beliefs, Joe, to be pretty possession based and pretty front foot kind of stuff, but believe it or not, a team I managed to beat a Stephen Kenny team once when I was Galway manager, and we played a low block for 90 minutes. We got our first shot on target in the 91st minute and we won the game 1-0. Now it was as ugly as hell, and it's not the way I want to play every week, but it's probably the most famous win I can put to my name, and it required a certain style of play, and you can't write off any style of play before you know what the requirements of each and every game are.
Just on that quote, I suppose, as well, like he says, I'll never just sit down and play with a low block and hope we can get a set play, and maybe that additional line there about hoping we can get a set play adds a layer of context to it, which is that maybe he's not saying I will never play a low block ever, but that even if we do deploy a low block, there will be actual transition, there will be counter-attacking, and like we've seen that from Ireland to a degree, I think, where at times under Kenny they've probably been at their best on the counter and struggle a little bit when facing against a low block. So maybe we're making too much out of one individual line, to be fair.
I think we are segueing into counter-attacking outfit increasingly, You gave a lamb to the slaughter sigh there when you talked about him not playing a low block next year, I thought.
Yeah, it's hard to avoid giving that sigh there, all right. So it is. No, look, like Gavin says, it's watching. I've argued the exact other side of the coin only recently on here with you guys saying that we're just. I enjoy going to Ireland games more than ever at the moment. but I would have thought that I would expect to rock up to the Aviva next year for one or two of those games and see an Irish team that's perched on the edge of its own 18-yard box and happy to play with 20% possession and hit on the counter. That would be my expectation.
I would think so. Plenty of Chelsea, Manchester United reaction on the front pages as well. So as for coverage within, there are pieces on the game, and then naturally enough there are pieces talking about people who were talking about the game, because that is often the most entertaining aspect. Although it was a very good game, it must be said. But for instance, page 5 of the Sunday Times, Peter Wilson, tunnel tantrum showed he cares, fiery Roy Keane defends absent star. So Roy Keane and Gary Neville, both former Manchester United captains, involved in heated debate yesterday. So Keane very much still on the Ronaldo side. He always has been. Even at half time it was interesting when they showed a Rashford chance. He just threw in a quip that Ronaldo probably would have scored that, and Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank started laughing. And then at full time there was a proper debate. So Keane said to Neville, who was on co-commentary and then joined them in the studio afterwards, Ten Hag was speaking about spirit after the game. Don't you think that's a message to Ronaldo? So he was arguing Ten Hag's not handling the situation very well, and he's sending barbed messages to Ronaldo. And he went on to say he still wants to be the best in the world, Ronaldo. That's why I admire him. I'd be more worried if Ronaldo was sitting on the bench laughing his head off, not caring. I think the guy cares. This game is full of bluffers and he's not one of them. So Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank was there as well. He tried to interrupt. He was, as Peter Wilson writes here, he was quickly told by Keane to be quiet because he hadn't finished talking. So Hasselbank said that Ronaldo does not give enough back at the moment. Keane was quick to point out he scores every 2 games for United. He feels frustrated he hasn't been getting enough games. He walked down the tunnel. Players have done a lot worse at Manchester United. I think it happens. It's human nature. And Neville's point was, in effect, Roy, Manchester United are better without him. They get more points without him. They score more goals without him. That's a fact. And he said he's got to leave. I would have been glad for him to leave in August, and he certainly should go in the next week or so. So that was the gist of the Neville Keane, and to a point, Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank debate.
What were they actually arguing about, though? Like, I say this as somebody who watched it and who heard every word of it, but
Yeah.
What was the argument? Because both of them acknowledged that it was wrong that he walked down the tunnel early. They acknowledged that Ten Hag was correct in punishing him. It was the only way to deal with it. It felt as though they were making vaguely the same arguments but at each other, and it was just a lot of speaking over each other. And I'm not being snooty, like I'm not being one of those guys who thinks, oh, like Roy Keane shouting isn't entertainment, because it is. Like, I do find it compelling, and I found it really funny how cross he was last night, and it didn't feel like an act at all. I thought it was genuine anger on his behalf, but I also felt as though he was arguing with Neville, who saw things probably 75% the same way that he actually did.
Yeah, I think they're on a lot of aspects coming out from the same point of view. I mean, I wouldn't be the only armchair psychologist who has wondered if Roy Keane is looking at the end of a great player at a great club and how he's been treated and starting to
Absolutely.
be triggered
Very relatable.
somewhat. You know, I
Very,
mean,
very
maybe that's
relatable.
going on here at Touch as well.
Yeah, but like Roy has taken a position on this a while back.
Took
and
it
he's-
early.
Yeah, took it
Doubled
early,
down.
and it's not like him to back down from an initial stance. So he's going to dig his heels in, and he's going to row behind his argument, regardless of what the facts or whether the narrative has changed. I got the sense of Gary Neville was arguing or making his points based on logic. Roy was making his points based on a stance that he had. I mean, at one stage, where I can't remember what exactly Roy says, but for all the world, Gary Neville gives the face or gives the kind of facial expression of a guy who's in an argument with a 5-year-old, who he's, this guy's not going to listen to me no matter what I say, and I'm just going to have to give up here. And there was a bit of that going on. It was brilliant TV. I thought it was brilliant TV, and it was, look, you look at what are they actually arguing over, and the wider context. I suppose really what they're arguing over is how well has Eric Ten Hag handled this whole situation, and I think he's handled it very, very well. I think he's handled it very
when
well.
Keane talks about the fact that Ronaldo's been disrespected, so like I've even listened to Gary Neville's podcast afterwards, and he was saying that various people I respect. I think he was talking about Keane, may have been talking about Ferdinand as well. Have said that Ronaldo was disrespected, and Neville said, I don't see that really. I don't really see the disrespect either, I have to say.
I really, really can't. No, look, I think he's handled it very, very well. Again, you watch, for me, I watch situations like this unfold with a coach's hat on, and you're trying to see, right, how is this situation handled? I've been there before, and I'd probably be there again, and I would have learnt lessons from the way I would have handled it before. I would have had a player at Wexford Youths where we would have had a high profile player and you have a falling out and we ended up having to go to the PFAI over it all, and you're wondering have I handled that right or wrong and all of that kind of thing. And even more recently I would have had a player and I would have asked the senior player for feedback after it, and they would have said that they felt I indulged him too much, if that makes sense, and let him away with too much. So you're always trying to see how well it's handled, and I think he's handled it really, really well here. And I think for me, Joe, there's no doubt he will have cemented the rest of the dressing room behind him very, very well in this situation. Very, very well. You look at Arsenal, who are currently sitting second in the Premier League, and I was part of a Dundalk setup when we went to play Arsenal. Arteta was one bad result away from the bullet. He's now, absolutely adored by Arsenal fans. I genuinely believe one of the biggest things that happened in his tenure was Aubameyang.
Yeah.
Could I just say quickly, Joe, on the disrespect part of it with Ronaldo? I think Keane was keen to stress he was trying to see it from Ronaldo's perspective, where Ronaldo might feel disrespected even if objectively there was no act of disrespect.
Yeah.
And I find like maybe sometimes we're quick to try and put ourselves in the boots in this instance of guys who are playing at this elite level of sport, and they're not the same human beings as us whatsoever. Like, the temptation often with something like this is to argue that Cristiano Ronaldo isn't bigger than Manchester United, right? It's like an old trope anytime something like this rears its head, when in reality he kind of is in a modern context. Like, Cristiano Ronaldo is the main character in his own movie, and he's been creating and crafting this script of his life for the last 20 years. Now he's in his third act, and suddenly it's like the studio are getting involved and interfering with the fairy tale ending, right? The studio in this instance being United, being Ten Hag, and for the first time ever he's subordinate to other people. And like, this started to happen as well at Juventus. Like, Neville made the point in his argument with Keane that Leonardo Bonucci and Giorgio Chiellini had come out and sort of said like there was a bit of a feed the monster syndrome at Ronaldo at Juve. If you look at their statistics when Ronaldo was there, they scored fewer goals in his 3 seasons than they had prior to his arrival. So like, this has been slowly going off the rails as Ronaldo has aged, and I feel as though his happy ending, like there's not going to be a sort of a rocky ending for him. It's probably going to be like inside Llewyn Davis or something, where he just sort of drifts off, and I don't think he's comfortable with that. And I feel as though he probably does genuinely believe the world is against him, and that to some extent Ten Hag is against him, even when objectively you look at it and United are a better team without him.
Yeah. So like, it's interesting, Paul McGrath writes in the Sunday World, and he does take the position of the footballer, of Ronaldo, as in his overriding thought on the whole thing is just sympathy for Ronaldo. So the whole thing is like, I just feel so sorry for him because I know where he's coming from. And he says what Ronaldo is going through right now is panic, desolation, confusion. You feel terribly alone, you feel incredibly vulnerable. Honestly, it was an earth-shattering experience for me, and I had nothing like Ronaldo's profile. He's on to say, the thought of losing everything, of no longer being able to do the stuff that set you apart from even the best of the rest, can cause you to do the most self-destructive things. And there's no question that Ronaldo's behaviour is self-destructive. I mean, for him to not sense that against Spurs, everybody at Old Trafford was maybe for the first time in several years realising, God, we could be onto something here. Everybody was happy. And for him to think, well, I'm not going to sense that general mood, I'm going to hit the car and go. And then to release the statement saying we'll be united again and things will get like, the statement was like, look, things are bad now and heat of the moment, but like, we'll be together. But everyone's like, we just beat Spurs, like, we are, things are fine. There's not a crisis here that needs to be fixed.
But again, it's kind of that modern context where what I'm saying about Ronaldo being bigger than United will probably annoy a lot of United fans or football traditionalists, but like, if you think of it from Ronaldo's perspective, like, he is being publicly humiliated. He has 490 something million followers on Instagram, right? Like, United have about 60 million, I think. So just to put it into context, like, the extent to which there's been a sort of a culture shift in the social media age where a lot of football fans don't nail their colours to the mast of a particular club but follow individuals. And Ronaldo is this like walking billboard and brand, and this entire thing is being tarnished. And like, he will be so cognizant after many years of having this level of global fame that he's been made to look like an idiot in front of 500 million people. Like, what's that, like 7 or 8% of the global population?
For him, it's humiliation. Shane McGrath touches into this idea that he's having to confront the awful prospect now that his powers are dimming, and for someone like him, the dulling that comes with age is hard to countenance, as well as his extravagant sporting gifts. His ego is also otherworldly, And I think that is the thing with Ronaldo. Like, for him to score 700 club goals, you can't have realistic ambitions. You can't have like a rational sense of yourself.
Individual.
No, you need to be deluded. You need to. Your ego needs to be out of control to do what he did in his career. So for the first 95% of his life, this insane self-image he had served him.
You well.
And now in the final 5% of his career, that's going to prevent him from saying, "Okay, I can do the Ryan Giggs Pro. I'll not play for 4 games, and then I'll go in and do an hour, or I'll segue into bit part Brian Robson." Great players that do that. That's why, as you said, this is not going to be a smooth landing.
Where does he go?
Oh, I don't know. Qatar for 2 million a game, or maybe France, or
Would his ego allow him though? Would his ego allow him to do that? I don't know.
Do you know? Maybe. Look, I agree with you. This is not. Like, remember the Celtic Tiger said it's going to be a soft landing. We're headed for the great economic crash of 08 here. Like, he can't switch from being what he was for that long, and that served him so well. He can't switch into being, best of luck, Langa.
Yep.
High five, and score some goals today. And
if you used the good phrase when you said his actions are self-sabotaging his own career at the moment. No doubt,
self-destructive. Yeah.
If he comes on last week against Spurs, okay, plays out the remaining minutes, does a big round of applause to all the supporters at the end with everybody else, right? He's on the bench yesterday. Yeah. He almost definitely comes on when the game is in the balance, right? He potentially scores a winner. Again, we go around, we give the big round of applause. Almost every big club in Europe is going to want that version of Ronaldo.
Yeah.
The guy as you said, who's willing to be, come on and win the game for you in the last 15, 20 minutes and is, 100% behind the team whether he starts or not.
It's too big. He is the best of all time.
Yeah, but that's actually
in his mind, he's the best of all time.
And he's not far off it in reality either, Joe, to be honest.
He's not. He may not be wrong. You're talking 15 minutes against Spurs.
Yeah.
Like, I'd spit on your feet.
Or fewer. And the thing is, being, let's say, one of the best of all time for the moment, he has become accustomed over the last few years, and we've seen in Instagram posts, for example, of his, where I don't know why I keep bringing up Instagram, I'm not on there that much, but like we've seen his obsession with his own statistics, right? Like, I think part of his legacy is probably he sees that little Wikipedia entry down the bottom of the page where like he has the record for Champions League goals, and that record is preserved until Erling Haaland surpasses it in 12 years time. Maybe then he can go off to MLS and live out his days. I doubt it, but I think coming on for 3 minutes against Spurs, or say even 15, he's probably looking at it, so realistically another game without a goal, like my goal's to get, so you're just trying, like, even statistically you're shafting me genuinely. And I think a modern footballer does look at things like that and thinks, so my goals to game average is just taking a hit here for what, like, so I can get a quick applause off the bench, and that's not going to sit well with him.
The one thing I would like to know, and we don't know it, is, has Ten Hag sat down with Ronaldo face to face and laid out the plan properly to him and said, I see you playing here and that many minutes, I can't have you playing there because of X, Y and Z, but this is how I see the season.
How does the other side of that conversation go?
Well, it depends. I mean, if Ronaldo could stomach it and it was laid out to him in the correct way, maybe, but it's only he may still have said, like, get those papers away from me, I'm playing every game, I'm the best. But was it laid out to him as a kind of cogent plan, or is it just week to week, you're messing with my head here, I'm not playing, I'm playing, what's going on? It just, we don't know the quality of communication which has gone on, and so maybe that's why off the bench he's just like, because he wasn't even there for pre-season. Like, this relationship has never been good.
No, and I've heard people suggest that maybe Ten Hag has almost engineered this situation to make it even easier to shift him out the door, but I find that hard to believe, not because I don't believe Ten Hag would be that devious. I think he seems like a very intelligent man who would absolutely have the capacity to do it, but you're actually finding it you're making it a lot more difficult to find a suitor for Ronaldo. Like, who's going to want him at the moment?
Apparently they couldn't in the summer anyway.
But I mean, if you couldn't in the summer, are you going to deliberately try to make it even harder, like by,
unless he's trying to blow the whole thing up
and just handshake,
get rid of this guy so I can get 50, 60, 70, 80 million to buy a replacement? Like, I don't, maybe Ten Hag's saying, I don't want to nurse this guy through the next 2-3 years.
No, I've no doubt he's saying that.
I don't want a good relationship with him. Potentially, so who knows?
Yeah, and look, like I said, one thing I know you said it's different worldly almost. The one thing I challenge on is, like, this happens on a micro level at every level in local June. Like when you're playing Leinster Senior League soccer, there's a Ronaldo in your dressing room, and there's these kind of dynamics going on. And as I say, and then you again, you know, that thing about everybody else. You know, there's the Ronaldo effect, but there's the everything else. Now, the obvious one at Manchester United is Bruno Fernandes. Like, it's ridiculous how better Bruno Fernandes is when Ronaldo is not on the pitch, because he quite simply feels, haha, now today I'm the man, and he steps out and he's a whole different guy.
Do you think it's purely that? I often find, because people will make that argument based on Fernandes obviously underperforming when Ronaldo was there, but I even think stylistically Ronaldo isn't the right
there's a bit of that in it as well, yeah.
Because Bruno, like Fernandes, like, I'm not saying it's the only pass he can play, but certainly his most effective pass is just a pass that splits the defence, usually in transition. And like, Ronaldo isn't the counter-attacking threat he used to be, the way a Rashford is. Like, Fernandes' crossing where Ronaldo would come to the fore is very hit and miss. So I actually honestly think they just don't even gel as players. But they probably actually like each other. Like, the suggestion has always been like, oh well, there's a clash of personalities, and Fernandes doesn't feel like the man when Ronaldo's there. Nobody does, I guess. But
and the one other point I'd make on it, Joe, just before we move off the counter, I've read 3 or 4 Ronaldo pieces. I'm not sure which one makes the point. I think it could be Tom Kershaw here in the Times, possibly. Like, the difference that Casemiro equaliser makes in the narrative around this whole situation. Like, it's unbelievable. Like, we've literally gone from an injury time goal, from the narrative being point proven, United are useless without Ronaldo, and if he had been on the field yesterday they would not have been beaten, and Ten Hag is a clown and he needs to figure out a way to get Ronaldo back into it, to there is no way United would have shown this amount of fighting spirit yesterday if Ronaldo was on the field, and the fighting spirit has got them to draw. Like, it's such fine
scoreboard
margins.
Journalism alive and well. 2 other quick takeaways. Casemiro's a lovely player. Like, I mean, he arrived. I remember Graham Souness kind of saying, look, he's a water carrier. He's far more than that. Maybe next to Modric he doesn't stand out, but in that Manchester United midfield, not since Michael Carrick have they had someone who can knit things together deep in their own half. I thought he was
But
brilliant.
Makelele was a water carrier, and look what happened when he left Real Madrid and went elsewhere. He became a superstar at the role that he not Casemiro said. Look, his intelligence level, his football IQ, Joe.
He's great on the ball. It's not talked about enough how good on the ball he is.
So good. Just, and it's I read a piece there recently, and he was the perfect example of it yesterday, where they talk about everybody is obsessed in football and in coaching at the moment with doing things quicker. Casemiro does things slower. He takes an extra touch on the ball where somebody else would have, played a pass. He actually takes the extra touch, slows it down, and all of a sudden the picture changes in that 1 second that he's taking the extra touch. The picture changes, and now a whole different situation is on.
There were times where any Manchester United fan watching certain situations last night was accustomed to, this is where they lose the ball, and they kept it, and it was down to him. And the other takeaway is Anthony is the biggest moan bag on a pitch of all time, and he had he wouldn't go at Dallo completely. It was like a 50-50. They mistook who was going to go for a ball that was kind of in between them, and he launches at Dallo. This guy's only in the place 5 minutes, and so he was doing this continuously. But then he met his match in the second half in Bruno Fernandes, and there was a point where the two of them, there was a pressing thing, and it didn't work out, and he had to go at Bruno. And as the play was continuing, they are screaming at each other for another 20-30 seconds, because Bruno's not backing down either. So that could be a Kieran Dyer,
as you said,
Lee Bowyer moment.
As you said at the start, there's so much going on here that it does kind of take away from the game itself. They kind of, the wannabe tactician in me can't let us pass off without saying, like, so unusual to see a substitution made so early in the game in the manner that Chelsea did, and it to have such a massive impact on the game. I know Graham Potter has that reputation, but Jesus, 35 minutes, Joe, that's extreme even by his standards, and literally went from 5-3-2 to a 4-4-2 diamond. I mean, you couldn't rip up plan A anymore, and
it worked instantly.
And it worked instantly. Instantly. A whole new game after it. I just think they're going to be absolutely intriguing to watch for the rest of the season. They really, really are.
I mean, I didn't like it because it killed the game. It's like, Jesus, Potter. You ruined this as a spectacle. So that's the football over the weekend then. The boxing, I know, caught your eye. So on 2 fronts really. There are a couple of pieces about Katie Taylor fights next Saturday in London against an opponent that she will completely outclass, and it seems everybody is just bemoaning the fact that the Serrano rematch is not going to happen anytime soon. And then there are a couple of pieces as well, and noting the fact Ireland did win 3 gold medals at the European Championships. We just take this totally for granted.
Yeah, well, it's inconveniently timed in relation to the Sundays as well, in that it only happened yesterday. Yeah, we might as well start there. It's bigger news really than Taylor's fight, and we can come back to that. Mick Foley covers them both in the Times. I guess it can be taken for granted the extent to which the boxers are successful on an international stage, but for a team to win 7 medals at the European Championships, even the European Championships lacking Russian competitors in this instance, when their previous record was 3, is obviously phenomenal statistically. And I think it's just even the little bits of detail between the lines, if you like Kelly Harrington adding European gold to an already phenomenal trophy cabinet, and it completes the set for her. Like, she's been a world champion in the past, she's obviously been an Olympic champion, but she'd previously gotten bronze and silver at the Europeans. Injury sort of thwarted her in 2019. She becomes only the second ever Irish fighter after Taylor to have won gold at all 3 majors, or the 3 biggest competitions that you can enter as an amateur boxer. And then, like, speaking of hat-tricks, Amy Broadhurst, she's a world champion, European champion and Commonwealth champion within the space of 9-10 months, if even
it's
that.
a real bursting on the scene, isn't it?
Yeah, and like, she's been plugging away for years at underage, winning European medals at underage level. She's a phenomenal talent. She's almost, in a strange way, playing a similar role to the one that Harrington played when Taylor was part of the Irish fold, in that Broadhurst has won these, all the more remarkably, 3 kilograms north of her natural weight. Like, she would probably prefer to be fighting at lightweight. It's just that Harrington remains the incumbent there, and there's only going to be 1 Olympic spot between them, so that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out over the next while. And then you have Aoife O'Rourke, back-to-back European champion, just phenomenal by her as well. She won Strandja Gold earlier this year. Her sister Lisa O'Rourke is a world champion and plays midfield for Roscommon, so just imagine being their cousin in Castlereagh at Christmas dinner. Like, just what would you? I just wouldn't go. You know what I mean? But you know what? Like, I suppose, like, to tie it together as well, Zaur Antia, the coach, doesn't tend to feature in these sorts of conversations. And like, he arrived in Ireland in 2003 from Georgia. He's been the mastermind really behind over 150 major medals in those 19 years.
I was just going to say, so Bernard Dunn has now departed to India. Billy Walsh, as we know, left, all in acrimonious circumstances, all amidst accusations of the association being badly run. Zaur has been the constant, and the medals have remained constant. Is it too simplistic to say Zaur is the one that we need to really be watching? If he ever goes, then things will change?
No, I don't think it's too simplistic at all. I think it's accurate. I think that to the credit of Walsh, to the credit of Dunn, you could make a strong argument that it could be even better if both of them were still involved. And I think that Zaur is absolutely, well, with the help of John Conlon, Dimitri Dimitruk, like, there's a coaching team there. But Antia is probably the best boxing coach in the world, and Ireland, as a sporting nation, is blessed to have him. The fact that he rocked up here, like, I won't spend too long on it, but it's a fascinating backstory, even, because Antia applied for the same job that Walsh eventually got in 2003. Antia didn't get the gig, but Gary Keegan, who had just set up the Irish High Performance Unit, was so impressed by his interview, which was done through a translator, that he went and sought funding to basically add a head coach to the director of high performance, so that Walsh and Antia could work in tandem. And it's one of the best decisions in the history of Irish sport. Like, he's been at the helm for more than a quarter of our Olympic medals as a free independent country, so it's not bad going.
I know. Like, Zaur, we hardly know you as well, that's the other aspect. Like,
and he's a massive personality behind the scenes. He does get a little bit camera shy, but the boxers are absolutely crazy about
they need to drag him onto the A shows one night and give him a standing ovation. Have all the boxers there who've won medals under Zaur.
Well, do you know what, when it comes to end of year awards and sports personalities and things like that, there's a coach of the year award, and Vera Pauw's going to get it, if we're honest, and I wouldn't begrudge her whatsoever. Like, and I would say, like, if we were just looking at it objectively from a sporting achievement, even this year, looking at what Antia has coached Irish boxers towards, 2 world golds, 9 European medals, crazy. Like, I actually don't even think there should be an argument.
He's overlooked, I think it's true to say. Just on the Katie Taylor pieces, so I see Mick Foley here, page 18 of the Sunday Times, and on page 65 of the Mail on Sunday, Mark Gallagher, both writing about the same thing. Really, it's that Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano are both fighting at the moment. So Serrano in Manchester fighting Sarah Mahfoud, and Katie Taylor's fighting on Saturday on DAZN. Her Sky Sports link has ended now. Katie Taylor fights Karen Elizabeth Carbajal on Saturday. So Mick Foley makes the point that in the pound for pound listings, Taylor is ranked number 1, Serrano's number 2, Mahfoud, who Serrano fought, is 21, and then Carbajal, who Taylor is fighting on Saturday, is 229. He says this is the company Taylor and Serrano are obliged to keep when they're apart. And so Mick Foley paints about the picture of Taylor retreated to the obscurity of rural Connecticut after their fight in Madison Square Garden. Serrano bought her dream truck, a couple of Rolex watches, and signed the paperwork on a house in Puerto Rico. Taylor was back in the gym 3 days later. He says her social media channels depicted a summer that was dotted with pictures with family back home, but mostly it was gym work, sometimes captioned by a mix of motivational catchphrases and Bible verse. And that was how Taylor spent the summer, really.
She did buy a speedboat last year as well.
Did she?
She
Yeah,
does.
it does mention the speedboat.
Oh, it does mention a speedboat. That's very. I
so
just presumed she'd rented a speedboat.
Oh, she bought it, yeah.
No,
Oh,
it says her
that's good.
speedboat.
We're chatting to her about it, and she said that she has to go out with friends. So she goes out, I think it's on a lake in Connecticut where she lives, and it's in search of just the tranquility of being on the water, but she can't go on her own yet because she didn't know how to moor it when
Okay.
she came back in.
That
So
sounds more like her, doesn't it? Tranquility.
Yeah, for a second I thought she was,
And to be fair,
party boat.
yeah.
to be fair, Joe, even though you've listed off all the stuff that Serrano went and bought herself, I, unlike Gavin, am far from a boxing expert. Like I'm sure most of the listeners are probably in my corner rather than Gav's in terms of our knowledge, but she came across as a fantastic individual, as a person, whatever about her boxing. She came across as so likeable, I thought, when she fought Taylor. She really did. So look, for the hard work she puts in, she deserves all the stuff that she was able to,
enjoy
buy
it
herself there. But yeah, look, this was the piece that grabbed my attention as I say, somebody who fleets in and out of boxing for the big events and not with the knowledge that Gavin have. For me, this was the sporting event of the year. I know there's still 2 months to go, but I thought it was absolutely unbelievable. I've never seen a comeback in any sport to rival what Katie Taylor did on the night. It was incredible viewing.
Yeah.
And on that side of things, you're saying, absolutely, when do we get the rematch? Bring it on. And if it is in Croke Park, if they could arrange it to be in Croke Park, and he goes into a little bit of the ins and outs of why that may or may not happen, I for one and many more would look to be there.
Well,
On the only other thing I'd say, Joe, on the flip side, with having watched it that night, I don't know if I do want it to happen, because I can't see any world in which she wins the rematch, to be honest with you.
Well, Mark Gallagher talks about that, like how the initial enthusiasm has waned. So he said, within moments of the final bell, before everyone started to breathe normally again, the appetite was whetted for a rematch. Even Serrano and her promoter Jake Paul were swept up in the excitement. In the immediate aftermath, the pair were agreeable to coming to Dublin for a second act. Such was the momentum, there was contact between Taylor's team and Croke Park about the prospect of staging it there. However, the initial enthusiasm from Serrano and Jake Paul soon started to wane. It took a long time for all parties to agree to a first bout, and now it looks likely that if there is to be a rematch, the negotiations will be even longer, even more protracted. Such as Taylor's appeal, there's a decent chance she could sell out Croker irrespective of her opponent, but her team wants Serrano, and part of that seems to be Serrano now says, you need me, let's pay up.
I think a lot of people's interpretation of Serrano, or the sort of forward-facing personality that we see on social media, can get conflated with the actual Amanda Serrano, in the sense that she doesn't even have a phone, to my knowledge, or at least she's made a virtue of not having a smartphone for a long time, and her tweets are generally sent by her manager Jordan Maldonado. So the person that we saw in New York, and I was lucky enough to be over there for the fight and during the week, is actually the Amanda Serrano who does want this rematch, but she, like everybody else, has a team around her who see the sense in waiting, and there's huge sense in waiting from their point of view. Like Katie Taylor beat Amanda Serrano fairly and squarely, but by a hair's breadth, and if you wait a year, as they seem intent on doing, Taylor's not going to be better next time around. Now there's an argument to be made that Serrano at 33, 34 may not be better either, but if your money was on anybody, it would be on Serrano in that rematch. The reason why it hasn't come to fruition outside of that sort of tactical delay is that when the first fight was agreed, and Mark Gallagher makes the point that it was protracted, if the rematch negotiations are more protracted, it simply won't happen, because Taylor will be about 42 and Serrano will be retired equally. So, but the reason why it isn't coming around more quickly this time is because a lot of the concessions made to Serrano's side of the equation in order to get her to take the first fight sort of affected the rematch, in that Matchroom were so keen to get the first one done. It was like, sure, yeah, you can do that in the rematch, you can do this in the rematch. And now when it's come to negotiating the rematch, obviously Matchroom are trying to roll back on some of the promises they made, and promises are pretty loose in boxing, and it's actually Jake Paul who's pulled the plug in it rather than Serrano. I saw Serrano on Instagram yesterday making the point on a video clip of Taylor discussing the prospect of a Croke Park fight, saying like, I'm still up for it, like let's do it soon. She seems keen. Again, maybe that's Jordan Maldonado, as I say, but it's a decision that's been made in her orbit rather than by her directly, and one that will probably benefit her in the long run.
The interesting questions for the Taylor camp, and maybe for Katie Taylor herself more than anyone, is say this drifts into next year, or say this drifts into 18 months. Does she say, I've gone too far into decline?
I don't think she sees herself as being in decline. I also don't think that she believes that she can go on for 5 or 10 years or whatever she said over the last couple. I do believe she's probably starting to realise that she is taking a lot of punches, like particularly from Serrano, who hits extremely hard. She made the point in an interview with DAZN, the broadcaster that's going to be showing her fight next Saturday, during the week, that she doesn't want to be absorbing that kind of damage for the rest of her life, obviously, but also that she hasn't fallen out of love with the sport by any means. I think the issue facing Taylor and the people around her is that boxing has been so integral and so central to her life for so long that she probably doesn't know yet what she wants to do afterwards. That is an absolutely gigantic void. We hear it in elite sport all the time, that people struggle with retirement, but a lot of these people at least have other interests. Like Katie Taylor might watch something on Netflix, but her life predominantly consists of her family and friends, church, and boxing is probably 65-70% of that. So to remove that from somebody's life without some sort of a backup plan.
I was literally just about to read out the line, because it's almost a line in its own within the piece that could nearly, justify a 2-page spread on its own in the Mick Foley piece. It says, how Taylor can never make peace with the eventual sundering of the link between boxing and her own identity as a person when retirement finally comes always lingers at the back of every tribute at her remorseless dedication. And I mean that, I remember seeing the TV documentary, or the Katie Taylor documentary that was made at the time as well.
Ross Whitaker's,
you'd worry for her. Jeez,
the only thing is,
worry a bit there,
her like Brian Peters, her manager, Ross Enimoy, her trainer, her mother Bridget, people around her, Eddie Hearn included, are cognizant of what we're talking about, and they know that at some point she will need to step away. It just may need some kind of sitcom style intervention, banner across the living room saying, Katie, we need to talk to you, from all of them, to actually convince her of the reality herself. And I don't know that for sure. What she says publicly may not reflect what she feels privately. I get the sense personally, the wrap on this, that I think next year could be her final year.
You'd hate to see her go on too long, wouldn't you? There's nothing be worse than see her go on too long and end up losing her last 2 or 3 or something,
I sort of think she's going to be okay, I think there's such a person of substance there. She's comfortable in her own skin. She's got her faith. I think she knows herself. I think if you have an ability to get out in the speedboat and be tranquil with yourself, and also she's not doing this for popularity and all the endorphins to go with that. She does it because she loves the craft of boxing. So I don't see why there's any reason why she couldn't have great fulfillment still staying in the sport as a coach and being up the crack of dawn and working with fighters she's passionate about, or finding something. I mean, sure, she'll miss it, but I'd be worried about others before her. It's often said about her, and I think we need to give her more credit in a way,
Yep.
My question would be, like a great player who maybe struggles when they go into management, could she struggle with, if that boxer that she coaches doesn't have the same single-mindedness and dedication to it, could she struggle with, she's going to need to find a good one if she's going to be
unlike
coaching,
Roy Keane being stuck at Ipswich, I would dare say she'll be able to find some good ones. I would think so, but who knows? I could be wrong. We're all guessing from afar.
No, totally. But you are right. And she's a highly intelligent person at that. We don't hear a great deal from her, but as you say, she's a person of substance. I've seen her at events around children where you would feel as though for her to be able to transition into even a, not necessarily like a full-time coaching role, but some kind of advisory capacity, have her name on a gym, something like that, and she's marvellous around kids. They love her and she gravitates towards them. That would be great. It's just that I don't know if that will be enough. And
it may not be, but
she's her on and she might tell us someday.
She's not like a footballer who'll miss the crowd 2 or 3 times a week. It's like her life in Connecticut is fairly...
I think she might miss the crowd though, where, even if it's only every 3 or 4 months. I mean, Madison Square Garden is going to be pretty tough to top, and the fact that she said after that fight with Serrano, I think this is the best moment of my career, probably. I suppose it put into context 2 things for me, like the fact that she was appreciative of the moment, and that she could soak it in, and that she was probably cognizant that it won't get much better than this.
Yeah.
And that by extension to that, she probably saw an end in sight, because if you can only recreate this once or twice more, one example being Croke Park, then it probably does start to feel finite in your mind. And listen, maybe she's thinking of the future more so than we are.
And we also, as you said, we also know very little of her intentions away from sport. I mean, has she, does she have intentions of a family? Does she, those kind of things obviously are going to play massively into that.
And I mean, look, her financial landscape has been transformed as well. This isn't an amateur who's like, well, now I've got to get a job. I mean, in that many respects, life looks very good. The future looks good. From Katie Taylor to Roddy Collins.
There's a boxing link there as well.
There is. Yeah, just about. Joe Brolly. Joe Brolly does a review of The Rod Father.
2 thumbs up, I would say. He's a big fan of the book.
He's a big fan of it. It's a strange topic for Joe Brolly to be writing about, and not the kind of thing I would have expected to open up the Sindo and see Joe Brolly writing about how much he enjoyed Roddy's book. I haven't got there yet, Joe, for the simple reason that I'm waiting for the audiobook to come out, because I believe Roddy is going to read the audiobook itself, which I think will be quite enjoyable.
From memory, apparently, he'll just start talking.
Ad lib, make it up as he goes along.
Different book, yeah.
Yeah, could be a very, very different experience. But no, look,
I love Roddy to do things in the audiobook, like, and come here, the lawyers wouldn't let me put this bit in, but I tell you what really happened there. Slip it in.
I wouldn't put it past them, so I wouldn't. No, look, I to be honest with you, I wouldn't go too much into Brolly's actual piece on it. I might find one or two of the more entertaining excerpts from it, but I think Roddy himself, love him or loathe him, he is a giant personality in Irish football. You certainly can't deny that. And he is still talked about long after kind of the biggest achievements that he's had in football. He's unique in that I don't think anybody who knows him remotely could ever. We're now in an area where everything is about, like I started talking about Graham Potter there a few minutes ago, and that kind of tactical intrigue, and you can imagine Graham Potter spends much longer planning his training session than the training session ever takes, to be honest with you, level. That's not Roddy. You can't ever imagine Roddy sitting down and with the pen and paper out and planning the intricacies of a training session. But he was a massive personality, and I'll tell you what he did better than anybody, Joe, was, like, with everything that goes on in football and managing a football team, people tend to forget that still by a million miles the biggest part of whether you're going to be successful or not is your ability to sign players. It will dictate how you do above anything else. How good you are on a training ground, everything maybe bar your budget. All right, Roddy was superb at finding players, talking them into signing for him, and then getting the most out of them. I would have been managing in the first division the year he won the first division with Athlone Town. That would have started the season 25, 33, 50 to 1 to win the first division, and they went and won it quite comfortably, and that was because he managed to talk players who should be at a much higher level into signing for Athlone Town. However he did it, I don't know, because I don't think he had that big of a budget. His ability to brainwash people almost with this just the charisma and the stories and the arm around the shoulder, and people, I think this is probably, people want to be around him. They want to be part of what he's doing. They want to be around him, and he managed to do that. And he actually, at that season, he was doing a weekly piece with yourselves. He was coming on once a week with yourselves, and it came down to themselves and Longford Town, kind of head to head towards the end of that season. Athlone had a bit of a lead, but Longford were trying to catch them, and he came on here on the Tuesday, I think it was. They were playing each other on the Friday night, and I don't know whether I can't remember which of he was interviewing him, but one of them said, and you've got a big game against Longford this Friday night, that one will probably decide. We're going to win that one. We'll probably win that one 3 or 4-0, to be honest with you, so we will. He literally said, and I was driving along in the car going, what? You can't say that. For numerous reasons you can't say that. You're leaving yourself completely open to egg in your face. You're motivating the opposition. This is the wrong thing to say in every way. They won the game 3 or 4-0. And Roddy looks an absolute hero, but like he was just the kind of personality who would do and say things, and even just chatting to him after a game, you just enjoyed being around him. You really enjoyed being around him, and I can't wait to, like, the book will teach me little to nothing, I would think, about certainly coaching. Will teach me a bit about man management, I would think, all right. But I just from entertainment point of view, I just can't wait for it to come out with the audio version, Joe.
There's a nice excerpt where he tried to teach Don Howe a little bit about football coaching when he was being scouted by Arsenal. Later Arsenal scouted him, and it was there that Roddy first demonstrated the self-destructive honesty that ultimately derailed his soccer career. Don Howe, Arsenal's head coach, was footballing royalty. As Roddy, who had been scouted from the Stella Maris club in Dublin, put it, Don didn't appreciate it when I started questioning some of his ideas. Turns out that having been assistant manager when Arsenal won the double in 1971, Howe had little or no interest in how Jimmy Brannigan had done things at Stella Maris.
That's good.
While you're flicking pages there's another very quick one about when he first met his wife, Caroline.
Which, by the way, I suspect there's a lot of heart in this book as well.
Oh, for sure. And to Brolly's credit, he's quoting a letter that Roddy wrote to Caroline, but he says, I won't spoil it for you, just the lines. I want you to think of me all day and night because I'm thinking of you all day and night. I swear I will not go off with any girls. I hope you are studying hard because if I don't get the football, you will have to get the leaving.
Why don't we write letters anymore to each other, huh?
Romantic.
Hey, speak for
romantic
yourself.
Rod.
To blitz through a few pieces then, and we'll get to some others that you guys have picked out. For instance, there's a little bit of cycling in the papers. You've got Mark Gallagher, page 60 of the Mail on Sunday, spoken to Dan Martin about his new book, and invariably the issue of doping comes up, and there's a parallel with the Paul Kimmage piece in the Sunday Independent. So the new book is called Chased by Pandas, My Life in the Mysterious World of Cycling. And what Dan Martin says there is, your options when you go into cycling are A, practice the sport in a despondent and defeatist state of mind, B, quit the sport, C, turn to doping, or D, avoid thinking about it. I chose option D. I knew doping was taking place, but I didn't let knowing it taint my way of thinking. And he goes on to be interviewed by Mark Gallagher, and he says, that's the truth. He says down a phone line from Andorra, maybe guys knew not to offer me anything, but it didn't come into my orbit. But as I say in the book, I knew it was taking place. It just wasn't taking place near me. Is it still going on? Nobody's ever going to be able to say that it's not. In any sport, you're never going to completely eliminate cheating, but I know that guys can compete cleanly in the sport because I was able to compete. If guys like myself are still able to compete, then the sport is doing something right. Paul Kimmage is remembering 1998 because obviously there's talk now the tour coming back, the Festina scandal of 98 and the fallout from that. There was promises made. He remembers November 98, Jean-Marie Leblanc, director of the Tour de France, speaking before the Palais de Congrès in Paris, and an impassioned speech about the future of the race and how it was going to be done clean, and we have to change things. And of course Lance Armstrong wins the following year, and he's 6 won by 2004. And Kimmage's references Paul Kimmage references Dan Martin's book as well. An interview he did with him previously as well, where Dan Martin did talk about taking tramadol once. It scared the crap out of me when the Giro. I pushed so hard, made myself so sick, it really terrified me. And Kimmage says, the only reason you were doing it was to enhance your performance. Yeah, that's the only reason you were doing it, yeah. And Paul writes, I guess we all like to pretend our SH1T doesn't smell. To be fair to Dan Martin, he's saying that was a one-off, the tramadol, and there was a TUE potentially for an inhaler as well. But in the main, he's obviously saying he didn't cross any lines. But Paul finishes by saying, this is in light of the tour coming to Dublin. The point of all this? Well, 24 years have passed since the tour started in Dublin, and we're about to gift a fortune, 20 to 30 million according to Jack Chambers, to the same people who made clowns of us the last time. Are they still doping? Can a clean rider win? Has the sport really changed? We have absolutely no idea. But the thing that grates most is that we don't actually care. So that's Paul Kimmage's point. I think it's probably true enough of people's attitudes to the Tour de France coming to Dublin. People will turn up, they'll watch the riders whiz by, it'll be a day out, the tourism people will be happy, there'll be a suspicion of doping, but you know,
can't see people getting overly invested in it one way or another.
No, I wouldn't think so. So there's cycling there. There is John Green, page 20 of the Sunday Independent. You picked this out, Shane.
Yeah, I've got a bit of, I suppose the fact that I've got a bit of skin in the game on this one, Joe, as you say.
We've talked about this every 6 months on the show for a decade. I kid you not. The Daily Mile, which was initiated by Elaine Wiley. Again, famous story. Scottish teacher realised how completely unfit her class were in Scotland, and she said, well, you're going to run for 15 minutes every day. And the thing spread like wildfire initially through Scotland. We now, by the way, have 15,000 schools in 87 countries. 3.75 million children have registered for that Daily Mile, running for 15 minutes a day. I mean, this has now been going on for so long that Elaine is now retired, and this is like her full-time gig. But John Green does the I think the appropriate thing, and he lists out where Ireland is in the obesity rankings, adults and children, talks to Niall Moyna. It's not good. We had Neil Martin in this studio, and one of the big parts of the interview was really trying to hammer home just how little PE our children do in comparison with other areas or other countries in Europe, and there was a commitment to do something about it. I don't know where we are in that commitment. I'm sure other things have gotten in the way, but we're well down the ranking list. And I mean, increasingly in society, especially wintertime, dark evenings, long days, and very, you know, this is a social and economic issue as well. The real intervention the state could make is through schools.
Without a doubt, 100% through the schools, and that is my day job at the moment, Joe. Is I'm in the schools 5 days a week around Portlaoise town. Portlaoise is a huge population, and I'm in the schools coaching and taking half-hour classes with the various different people in there, and it's under the guise of GA activity, but particularly with the younger ones, it doesn't resemble hurling or Gaelic football in any way.
Just haven't played soccer, do you?
No, not that either. Oh, definitely not. You'll get me the sack now. No.
Don't pick it up. Head it.
Yeah.
Ground football, yeah. A lost art.
No, look, you're working on what they call FMS, fundamental movement skills. So yeah,
you're in decline, I'm told.
The which?
They are. Fundamental skills
really,
are in decline.
But that's because, I mean, I'm going to sound ridiculously old, but that is almost solely down to consoles, computer consoles and smartphones and all that kind of thing. Like, my young fella is asking for a Nintendo from Santa Claus. He's looking at potentially getting his first Nintendo this December, and I am terrified. That young fella lives on his trampoline. I am terrified how much time how much of a decrease there is going to be in the amount of time he spends on the trampoline. Terrified
to the extent that, like, there might be a shortage in the North Pole of Nintendos.
No, not. I'm sure Santa Claus will manage to get his hands on one, all right, but there'll be agreements put in place in terms of how much Nintendo equals how much trampoline or
well,
sport
Shane,
in the back
you know
garden.
what happens to those agreements, so best of luck with that, mate.
Yeah, we'll see how all that works out.
No, it's really serious. I mean,
it is.
It's proper crisis unfolding.
Look, I did a big bit of research this morning, which was to ask him what's the crack with the mile a day in his school, and he says they do it pretty much every day, weather allowing. He said they don't. The teachers, he said last year's teacher actually asked them to go and jog around and do a few laps of it, whereas this year's teacher says you can do that, or if 10 of the boys want to play 5v5 soccer for that 15-minute break, they now call it a 15-minute movement break.
Right.
So if you want to play a game of sport, you can play a game of sport. If you just want to go for a few laps around the school, go for a few laps around the school. But yeah, they would do that, and they do that twice a day, he tells me, aside from what they call small break and big break, which
Shane,
is...
it's the best half hour of their day.
Oh, without a doubt. And this piece goes on to stress all of, obviously, the psychological benefits, all the benefits away from just the fact that obviously it's ridiculously healthy for them, but in terms of, you know, friendships and all of that kind of thing. Like, we also established one of the junior park runs in our town just this year, Joe, as well. And again, you know, another thing because obviously I am heavily involved in sport, but you are conscious that so many people aren't, because sport, as the point is made here, is inherently competitive, and a lot of kids, you know, as soon as they hear competition, don't want to have anything to do with it. So we brought in the park run. Believe it or not, this morning's is the first we've had to, we established it in June. This morning's is the first we've had to call off since then, because it was absolutely lashing at home when we were coming out. But we have the park run every Sunday morning in our place at 9:30. It's 2 kilometres. Some of them, Connor, my fella, is quite competitive. Some of them will run it and do the best they can. Others will jog around so slowly that they're barely moving, but they'll be chatting away to their best friend the whole way around it, and there's still great benefits from it.
And sorry, in a year's time they'll be jogging a bit more quickly.
They will, of course, 100%, Joe. And the knock-on effects, Joe, then, as well as that. So our track, thankfully, is right beside the park. So sure, there's not a single kid who comes to do the park run who doesn't then go from the park run into the park, and best of luck trying to get them out of the park. They're probably there for another hour. So all of a sudden, it's 11 o'clock, and if you look at the young fella's smartwatch or whatever they're called, he's 4,000, 5,000 steps done by 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Sets you up for the day.
I think with that aversion that some kids have at an early age to competitive sport, and this idea that if they have to play a game of soccer or basketball or whatever it might be, that they might be embarrassed in front of their peers, like it's crucial to do things like that where there is a more communal vibe and that there is no necessity to actually compete. And I also think even possibly at an even earlier age, we're taught probably at 3 or 4 that you need to brush your teeth, and it just becomes a part of your daily routine. I think if not necessarily sport but physical activity was stressed to kids in a sort of a similar way, that it's just part of your daily routine from that age. Now I'm not making an original point here necessarily, but just that they wouldn't necessarily see it as sport and something in which they have to compete with people, but actually something that just benefits them from a very early stage in their lives, the same way brushing your teeth or not talking back to your parents or whatever. And just on the Santa thing, I mean, if promises may be broken to parents, but I've found a contract with Santa, it means a lot more. A little bit of a stipulation, and who knows.
Well, the
Looking
piece points out we're up to 9th now in Europe for obesity, kids between 5 and 9. So it's not in a great situation, really. That's John Green. It's across 2 pages 20 and 21. And I mean, that's a big success story, though, to have 3.75 million children registered for the Daily Mile. I mean, from let's just do it in my classroom in Scotland to that in a decade is quite something. It shows how change can be made pretty quickly. Well, on the trying to make change pretty quickly point, it is Respect Referees Day. Weekend? Day.
Day, I think. Yeah.
Pat Spillane in the Mail or in the Sunday World says this is just a PR thing. I mean,
Joe, we could
obviously
never,
it is.
We could never respect him for a whole weekend.
Obviously it's a PR thing. Of course it is. That's the point. It's to raise awareness. So you have various people writing about this. Colm O'Rourke, page 13, Sunday Independent. Tommy Conlon, page 12, Sunday Indo. Shane McGran, the Mail on Sunday, is touching on it as well. I mean, there's just so many different approaches. Like Colm O'Rourke talks about a lack of accountability at the root of ill discipline. Talks about, if a mentor is doing it from the sideline, then the club need to get onto the mentor and get that sorted ASAP. If it's somebody in the crowd who's a baying ass from outside the wire, then those around that person maybe say something. He says most of the time the best people to do this are women. They might feel intimidated, but the quote attributed to Evan Burke applies here. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is that good men, he puts in brackets, and women do nothing. Decent supporters have the power to rein in a lot of bad behaviour. And he also says there are more excuses now for young people's bad behaviour than in previous generations. Lack of parental control, shortage of money, no role models, etc. Nobody seems to understand 2 words: personal responsibility. It is the root of civilised society. So that's some thoughts from Colm O'Rourke. Tommy Conlon, I thought it was just brilliantly written. I thought the point has probably been made numerous times before, but in effect it's quite a long piece. But he's basically saying that this is just what makes the GAA great is also at the heart of this referee ill discipline in many ways. He said the very essence of the organisation is the umbilical connection between home and game. You play the game not just for the game's sake, but for the community that you represent. The 2 strands inextricably interwoven. The game therefore transcends mere sport. And he talks about tribal expression, my parish against your parish. It's upon this rock the GAA built its church. But he says, if you play with fire, you get burnt. The same fuel that has propelled the GAA to such power and stature as an organisation is the same fuel that explodes into malaise and violence when sparked by the slightest altercation. He said the GAA has never been able to seriously eliminate this scourge because to do so would require a repudiation of its own core principle, its essential raison d'etre. There is a profound psychological conflict at the heart of this matter. He finishes by saying, so it would seem that as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, there shall be no returning of the genie to this particular bottle. I don't think it's right to say the GAA can never get on top of this, but I do think there is absolutely something in Tommy Conlon's piece. I've been in soccer dressing rooms and GAA dressing rooms growing up right the way through to mid-20s when work took over, and absolutely the fuel of the GAA dressing room was, we're playing the lads from down the road, this is us against them, and you were charged going out and there was violence in the air. Whereas football, there was never that sense of tribalism. It was like first tackle, first pass, let's go out and play our game, that kind of stuff. Not to say there weren't issues in football matches as well, and there have definitely been issues on grassroots soccer sidelines for sure, but it didn't get the heart beating in the same way.
It's almost a pro and a con of the GEA.
That's what he's saying.
It means more.
Yeah.
It means more. Because it means more, the ref is going to get more abuse.
And like a slight on you is a slight on the town, so you better fight back. That kind of atmosphere.
It's brilliantly written. Look, Joe, the only point I would make, and we're talking about referee day, like, is it possible to change it? It is possible to change it, but it absolutely has to be a bottom-up approach. I was at a Common Munn school game during the week, and I cannot understand. If I was the referee, and I'd like to think I'm not that soft-skinned, if I was the referee, I cannot understand why the referee didn't just halt the game.
Who was it? Parents?
Literally, yep. Yeah, literally just, so we're talking Common One school, so we're 5th and 6th class kids. There was a gaggle of 3 dads standing together on the sideline who were so invested in this game of 11-year-olds kicking a Gaelic football around the field. It was absolutely ridiculous. And by God help that referee if he made any decision that those 3 men weren't happy with.
It's embarrassing, isn't it?
It was embarrassing to everybody bar those 3. Those 3 didn't seem to, and I got moved into a position where I was trying to get in their eye line and kind of giving them looks as much as say, boys, can you hear yourselves here, kind of a thing. And they looked at me as much as to acknowledge me. You just go on with yourself there, and off they went again. But for me, the only way that stops is that the referee stops the game and refuses to continue with the game unless they are literally removed, and then the kids see how wrong this is, and then maybe the kids' behaviour is slightly different when they're an adult, but it's not going to get fixed away. I understand the GA have to be seen to try and do something fair play to them, but like, this is something that I think is going to need 10-15 years of fixing, and it has to happen with. Like,
Pat's plan's right. Of course it is just a gimmicky PR weekend, you know, he's not wrong, but I guess they feel they have to do something, because actually it's been as bad a year as I can remember. The litany of drip of issues.
I've absolutely zero doubt that these issues have persisted for years, like, but I wonder to what extent is it just that maybe the conversation is more prevalent, that we hear more examples of it recently as well, in the sense that because it's a talking point, because it's being discussed as a plague on the game, it's more accentuated when it actually happens. And
well, it's a story now. You get to you stick it up, it gets clicks, and often a mobile phone captures it as well, which adds a bit of.
And I think maybe arguably more mobile phones are out now to capture those moments than might have been the case even last year. Like, I don't know for sure, but I'm not certain that there has been an increase necessarily, just an increase in our exposure to it. What you were saying there, Shane, about like a potential solution being the referee stopping a game, I think on the one hand I'd love to see that happen, where you actually present the supposed adults on the sideline with no alternative but to shut the hell up, otherwise your children's game can't actually proceed. But equally, it's probably a double-edged sword, like, where if those people are as brazen as you're making them out to be, they may just continue to shout, and it becomes a bigger scene, and suddenly it's in the Indo or the 42 or whatever, and I wonder, is, like, it probably shouldn't actually rest on the referee's shoulders to intervene here. I completely agree with you, like, that it has to be from the ground up. I think Tommy's piece is interesting in the sense that it outlines absolutely brilliantly and quite poetically what the GAA means to people to a certain extent. I suppose it's unfortunate that all of this spectacular guttural energy is directed towards the referee, you know, and you kind of think, like, why does the referee get it more than everybody else on the pitch? It's like, because he's not going to swing back at you, or he's not going to, you know what I mean, like, and they're just lightning rods in that sort of an environment. I think it's going to be a gradual process where personal responsibility, as Colm O'Rourke puts it, does come into it, but it's going to have to be drilled into people from an earlier age to just, I know it's a cliche, but just to have a little bit more respect for people. And if it becomes part of, like, I don't think necessarily that having respect for a referee from an early age up to senior will dilute in any way from all of the brilliance of the GA that Tommy outlines in his piece. It's just, it needs to start somewhere, and I guess it's there.
So there's just a quick mention, but it was on page 10 of the Sunday Times, and it's Vera Pauw, and so the qualification draw happened yesterday morning. Ireland, a very tough draw, by the way. So Nigeria and Australia hosts, they are going to be good invariably, and they're highly ranked anyway. They're 13th in the world, and Olympic champions Canada. And Vera Pauw's making the point, Nigeria, by the way, they're way better than their ranking out of pot 4, and their ranking of 45. In Africa, when you're the highest team, you can only play against African teams ranked under. Winning 10-0 doesn't make you go up the rankings. On the few occasions they play against teams from another continent like Europe, high-level Asian countries or America, it's not enough to lift your ranking. We should note Nigeria are a very good team. If they had played in Europe, they would have qualified, and they're out of pot 4, so it's going to be difficult. But the line that caught my eye, the opportunism here, oh my God. So she said, it's funny, when you qualify, suddenly there are lots of players with Irish backgrounds. They email you, and they weren't emailing you before you qualified.
Yep, and she already goes as far as to, she's kind of paving the way a little bit that we may see one or two of these girls, because she does say that we are only entertaining those who already hold Irish passports, not those that are now going to go seeking Irish passports to try and play for Ireland. So, you know, it's a balancing act there. You know, trying to be as competitive as they possibly can be. You look at Lily Agg, and you know, she was absolutely top class for Ireland from the time she came into the setup. Lily Agg's background is Cobh. She spoke to our Cobh under 17 girls before one of our sessions there last month, and you know, you couldn't but like her, and really warmed to her, and she is now 100% integrated into the Irish setup. You know, how many of those were willing to try and work with or make that happen with? You would think one, maximum two more, because obviously the girls who have got us there, you know, she's got to surely have some sort of.
I'm not sure about the wisdom of saying, I've had loads of emails now since we qualified, because now, like, the next camp when she unveils, here's a new player, we're all going to be like, well, we know what happened here.
I'm not sure if it's in that piece. I know Morris Brosnan was on that call for us, or it may have been an in-person thing, I'm not sure, but I saw a quote that we had where she qualifies a little bit by saying, firstly, about the fact that these women will have to already have an Irish an Irish passport, but also that, like, you know, that she has also had an eye on some of these players, arguably. So it's like, if one or two do surface, I'm sure she can point towards the fact that, well, we actually already knew about this player. It's not necessarily somebody who emailed me
10 minutes after the
exactly. Yeah. I didn't check my phone in Hampden Park and say, oh, interesting. So but look, every little helps as well. And like, of course, the introduction of a couple of new players will mean, by definition, that maybe some players that were involved in the squad may say that that's elite sport. In that sort of a group, Ireland are going to need every little bit of help that they can get. So.
Yeah, we're pretty much out of time. Very brief mention, Chris Hughton, good interview, page 68-69 of the Mail on Sunday. You're going to see him in Qatar, Chris Hughton, just if you weren't too sure what he's up to. He's the technical advisor for Ghana, where his father left in the 1960s as well. So there's a familial link to Ghana. They did get to the World Cup quarter-final in 2010, Luis Suarez handball situation, but he talks, you won't be surprised to hear, he's asked about the paucity still of non-white faces in dugouts across football. So 34% of players in the Football League are black, and there are 5 such managers in full-time positions throughout the pyramid. Vieira at Crystal Palace, Paul Ince at Reading, Vincent Kompany's at Burnley, Sheffield Wednesday have a Darren Moore, and Keith Curl is at Hartlepool, and that is it. More disturbingly, there are only 2 in Europe's Big 5 leagues, the entire Big 5 leagues in European football, Patrick Vieira and Antoine Cumbert of Nantes.
That amazed me. The second one nearly more so.
It's crazy, isn't it?
I would have thought across Europe there would have been
2.
far more representation.
2. And I, like, between stories 10 years ago, should we bring in the Rooney Rule and all this, and there were like 3 in the Football League, and now there's only 5, so it actually hasn't improved. And he says, huge lack of diversity, and it's not because the talent pool isn't there. I will never accept that. He says, I believe in the Rooney Rule, but does it work? And do clubs implement it? Probably no. What happens is what always has happened. The club sack a manager, but they already have someone in place for the job. And he talked about his own time in dealing with racism. He said, you experienced it, you got on with it. The support mechanisms were your home life, your family, your friends. That was the comfort zone. You would go back to them and try to process it. And he, like, you get the impression, like, a very steady, strong, very capable man was better able to process it. Not that he should have had to than most, but like, still had to go home and process it nonetheless. You know, it's not to say it didn't take a huge toll on him, but
the numbers are stark. The numbers are even more stark than I would have thought, Joe, to be honest with you. I mean, nine black managers in the history of the Premier League, and that includes Chris Ramsey, who had 1 game.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Like
30 years.
absolutely incredible.
So you can't say there's not overt racism at place there.
But I don't know how you fix it. I don't like. Again, I don't think you can. I can't see how you can implement a rule. You know, maybe there are mechanisms around it, but you know, a club is going to want to employ a manager, and whoever they pick. Like they can't. I don't know how you can force their hand in that sense.
Well, it's a really good read. It's on page 68, 69, Mail on Sunday, and like I said, he'll be in Qatar at the World Cup. We're out of time. Was there anything you desperately wanted to mention that you didn't get a chance to?
No, all good on my side anyway, Joe.
Okay, very good.
Happy to avoid Munster's defeat, Joe. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, we had Munster Leinster stuff written down. I don't know, it's the usual. Leinster were reasonable. Munster gave a good account of themselves.
Munster are back. Munster are back.
Munster are back. Shane Keegan, Cobh Ramblers manager, and Gavin Casey, the 42. Thanks, fellas.
Cheers, Joe.
Cheers, Joe.